Good afternoon. Hey everyone, my name is Joseph and thank you for coming here to this Implicit Biases training. I'm here to teach you a little bit more about what implicit biases is and how to understand it within yourself. I know that one of my other colleagues has spoken to you briefly about what implicit biases is, since the Starbucks training really wasn't that complete. Even though they did a really good training, I give them kudos for that. And they focused a lot on conscious biases and what racism is, but they tackled implicit biases like maybe that much. And so considering that was what their whole workshop was supposed to be about, they left that part out. So we're here to teach you a little bit more about what implicit biases is. And to start, I would like to show you a little graphic that I used in the past when learning to really understand in a visual way what implicit, unconscious, and conscious biases is. So here we go. So as you can see here, I have a graphic of an iceberg. Now this iceberg is supposed to represent our brain and how our brain works when it comes to biases. As you can see at the top of the iceberg, the part that's showing above water, that's our conscious biases. Conscious biases is where we make the choice to feel a certain way or not about a group of people or an issue or anything. It's the part of our brain where we actually think. We critically think about things and we make a choice. We make a choice about things, and that is what allows us to have those biases that are conscious to us, where we make that choice whether we're going to do the right thing or the wrong thing when it comes to that bias that we have. Now the bottom part of the iceberg represents our unconscious biases, our implicit biases. That's the part of the brain where it's deep, it's really deep, and it goes back generations after generations. And there could be stuff in there into your psyche, part of your brain that you don't even know that is even there. But implicit biases comes out in a split second. Before you know it, you might be in a situation and something comes out of your mouth, or you say or do something that is out of your character that you would never have thought that you would have done in a million years. That is an implicit bias. That is something that was embedded into your psyche probably from a very young age, or in a situation, in a traumatic experience that you didn't even know was traumatic for you until that implicit biases comes out. So the top part of the iceberg is where we make the choice. The bottom part of the iceberg is where we do not know that we have biases. We don't make the choice to have those biases. They're just there. But once they do surface, that's when they become conscious. And that's when we have the right or the opportunity to make the choice whether we're gonna continue on in a negative route with those biases, or if we're gonna understand them and make a change within our own psyche on how we feel about that biases. All right, so let's go on. All right, so the number one thing to remember when it does come to understanding what implicit biases are, or what your implicit biases are, there's one question that we all have to ask ourselves. Does anyone here know what that question might be? The answer to that question is why. Why do we feel that way? Why did we do the thing we did? Why are these feelings coming out? Why do I feel this way? So why is very important when it comes to understanding your own implicit biases. So with that said, I'm going to tell you a little story. So before I tell you a story where I'm going to be totally transparent in, I want you all to remember that you're in a very safe place. I want you to remember that you are here without judgment. And I do hope that we can open up and have a conversation in a few minutes talking about biases, to where no one feels judged and we will all be respected in this conversation. So with that said, on with the story. So my story begins with my decision to go back to school to provide for a better life for my son. I have been working in the food and beverage industry and also in the retail management industry for quite a while, and I decided enough is enough and I wanted something better before I could provide for my son going forward into the future. So I decided to go back to school, and I was thinking about what do I want to do that was really meaningful. So I decided that I wanted to get my degree in either social work or human service or something like that, and work with either the homeless population or with foster and adopt children, since my son was adopted through the foster care system. So those were my two big passions, and that's something I wanted to do. So I looked into schools in this area and found an extension program at Everett Community College with a human services bachelor's program through Western Washington University. So I went and signed up and became a part of the cohort there, and I was joined by these wonderful people as part of my cohort. That's only a few of them, which you might be able to point out some of them, because a lot of them work within the community here in Snohomish County. So with that said, I went on to get my degree from Western Washington University and ended up here at this wonderful organization that I love so dearly. So I'm here because my story about implicit biases started in my education for my bachelor's degree in human services. Alright, so a part of my degree was to take this class where we learned about our conscious and unconscious biases. And my professor, on the first or second day of class, decided to tell us more about what we're going to be learning. And when she was talking about unconscious biases, she kept on saying each and every one of us has unconscious biases. And I'm over here thinking to myself, no, I don't. And then she kept saying, yes, you do. And I kept thinking to myself, no, I don't. And I kept thinking I am one of the most liberal, progressive, kindest persons on the face of this earth. There's no way I could be biased or have biases towards anyone. But yet she kept on saying each and every one has biases, and we're going to learn what those biases are. We're going to learn how to understand them, blah. And I'm thinking, no, I am not a racist. And that's all I could think. When I heard biases, I heard the word racist in my head, her calling me a racist. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not a racist. And I just grew immediately frustrated to an extreme where I just wanted to get out of that class. I did not know why I was there. I wanted to drop the class. So it's time to go. I exited the class, got into my car, was driving home, and I just wanted to get home, people. I really wanted to get home because I was so frustrated with this woman saying I was a racist. And so I'm over here driving home, okay? And then I get behind the slowest person in the world. I'm sure a lot of you know the type of situation I'm talking about. I'm sure more than one of you have been in this sort of situation. So I'm over here driving, and I just want to get home because I'm done. I'm done, okay? So I just want to get home, and I'm driving. He's driving so slow. I'm over here honking. He's still all driving all nice and slow. And so I just grew so frustrated that finally a car passed, and I was able to maneuver around and pass this person. But then, as I'm driving around this person in the frustrated state that I was, I turned and I looked at the driver. I turned and I looked at him, and I just automatically just yelled at this person out of rage. And it's open up your damn eyes and drive. And then as I'm passing him, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell did I just do? Because I just yelled that to the nicest, sweetest looking old Asian man out there. Where did that comment come from? Why did I say that? What in the world was going on with me? Where did that come from? And it just really frustrated me. So when I got home, I couldn't eat. I was already frustrated with my class, but then I started thinking, where did this come from? Why did I say that? Where did those words come out of my mouth? Because they've never come out of my mouth before. So I'm just sitting around my house just thinking and thinking, where could it have come from? And then I remembered from my very far past, when I was a little kid, my mom used to say comments like that, out of the blue. It was a split second, just like that incident that I had just went through. It happened in a split second. And that comment, that negative comment, that ugly comment came out of my mouth. But I remember my mom doing the same thing. And then I started thinking about things my mom did when I was younger that were all negative towards, the Asian community. And so I called my mom on the phone. It's like, hey mom, I'm just calling. I have a very serious question to ask you. And I was wondering, why are you racist towards Asians? And this woman blew up on me. She totally blew up on me on the phone. She was cussing me out. She was yelling at me. She's like, I'm not a racist. I don't hate Asians. How dare you say that about me? And so as I'm talking to her, I'm explaining to her, well, I remember you saying this, or I remember you doing this. And she's like, well, I didn't mean to do that. Those are things that just came out of the blue that I just said in an instant. And I'm like thinking, okay, it happened in a split second. But I wanted to know more. Why was she saying those things when I was a kid? So as I dug deeper and deeper in our conversation, I learned a few things. And this is what I learned. The first thing I learned about why my mom says the things that she said towards Asians stems from way back to her childhood when she was a little girl during World War II. Now, during World War II, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And when that happened, internment camps happened to have popped up in certain parts of the United States. They were internment camps, but a lot of people still refer to them as the Japanese concentration camps of the United States of America. So my mom was there when living not far from one of these camps because her family was stationed there in California at the time when my grandfather was over fighting in World War II. And so growing up there, she witnessed the Japanese being gathered up and put on trains and being, as she sort of described it, like being paraded through the streets. And when they were being sent through the streets, to go to the trains or whatever, there were people yelling, nasty comments to them. There were people throwing rocks at them. It was a really traumatic experience for my mom to witness. But then there was also propaganda going up all over the place. Businesses saying that they don't serve to Japs, or comments like that. Sort of something like you would see in the South, for African Americans. And so my mom grew up around this as a little girl, witnessing this hate and this fear. And so it's sort of like digested into her brain, I guess, and she never really thought about it before. And up until I started questioning her, that is. And so with all this going on as a little girl, that was like the first interaction she had with the Asian population that triggered the comments, her unconscious biases towards the Asian community. So we're going to just fast forward a little bit to the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, my mom was married to my dad, and my dad did go fight in the Vietnam War. So while my mom was here at home, while my dad was away, there was a lot of propaganda and stuff going on here in the United States. There was a lot of protests and a lot of anti-Asian sentiment going on too, because you still had my mom's generation or older that had a lot of the sentiment, the anti-Asian sentiment from World War II and the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But then you have this new sentiment from a younger generation of people who were growing frustrated with the Vietnam War because a lot of the U.S. men, husbands, sons, brothers, were being killed over there. And so there was a lot of frustration about that, but then we were bringing Vietnamese refugees to America, and that increased the anti-Asian sentiment within this country that sadly still lasts to this day, where a lot of people still feel strongly about what went on in the Vietnam War and how the U.S. handled it. And so with that sentiment going on, with what she went through during World War II as a young child, again, anti-Asian sentiments being, downloaded into her brain at this time. But during this time of the Vietnam War, it did hold a sort of different meaning for my mom, to where it was a little bit more personal My father never died in Vietnam. He did come back, but when he came back, it was disclosed that my father had an affair with a Vietnamese woman while he was in Vietnam. And so while my mom was here worrying, crying at night, sick to her stomach, worrying about if my dad's going to make it or not, he was over there having an affair with a Vietnamese woman. So my mom, again, anti-Asian sentiment from World War II, anti-Asian sentiment from the Vietnam War, and then a Vietnamese woman sleeping with her man. And so it leads us into the 1970s. So in the 1970s, my mom decided she wanted to be an independent woman. My mom decided to join the women's movement, and so my mom wanted to go to work. She wanted to find a job and gain employment. And so during this time when she was gaining job skills that my dad was so heartedly against, because he was very old-fashioned and believed a woman's place was in the home, cooking, cleaning, and raising kids. And so while my mom was doing this, trying to gain skills to find a job, my father and her grew apart. And during this time when they grew apart, my father had an affair with none less but another Asian woman. He fell in love and met a Korean woman that he married, and after my parents got divorced. So he basically divorced my mom and married this woman not shortly thereafter. And so between these things that happened with my mom that all evolved around Asians, my mom grew an unconscious biases towards them, and she didn't even know it. She just knew that she had comments that came out of her mouth at a spur of the moment, but she never really understood them. She never understood how to make them go away or how to become aware of them. She just knew at times she would say things that weren't right, that were wrong, but they would just come out for some reason. And it's not like she made the choice to hate every Asian on earth. She never made that choice. Like I said, she has Asian friends. And so my mom is really upset that it affected me, that those comments somehow sunk down into my psyche, which triggered that comment to come out of my mouth on that day when I was driving home in a frustrated rage. And so that's the part of implicit biases that you have to understand. Each and every one of us, as my teacher so heartily tried to instill in every one of us that I didn't not want to believe on that one day, but we all have unconscious biases, and it's up to us to discover what those are. If we happen to think back to conversations we had or things we said that maybe came out of the blue, we need to go back and re-examine those things and say, why did I say that? Why did I do that action? Or why did I do that thing I did? And re-examine those situations and question ourselves, was that an unconscious bias that we did or said? And once we recognize those, we will be able to make ourselves aware of situations to where we would not discriminate against others that we're working with or clients that we may have that are from that certain race, culture, or population, or whatever. So with that said, I want you to now watch this short clip. It's a minute long of just photos. There's no music. It's going to be silent. So I want you to look at these photos now, and I want you to think of the very first thought that comes to your head once that image pops up. And then I want you to keep it in your mind, those thoughts that you had, and then at the end of this, we're going to have a conversation about what our biases are. All right, so for now, watch this clip. Thank you. Alright, so as you were watching that clip, I hope you were taking mental notes of yourself of what your first thoughts were when you were viewing each clip as each image went by. And so now I have to ask you, what are your biases and why do you have them? What I would like to do now is to break you all up into two groups and start a conversation, because the only way to recognize and to understand what implicit biases are to start a conversation about it, start talking about it, start educating ourselves about the implicit biases that we have within ourselves. And by talking about it and opening ourselves up and becoming vulnerable and becoming transparent, we're able to understand what it is that make us feel or think a certain way about that certain group of people or population or whatever it may be that we have a bias against. So I'm going to have my two colleagues break you up into two groups, and just remember that this is a respectful place. It's a place without judgment, and I do hope that you all can start a deep conversation about implicit biases and how it has affected you or in your life, and how you feel that you will be able to take the material that you're learning today and use it in your job or in your workspace to prevent biases from happening, to prevent discrimination. Because if we recognize what our biases are, we can prevent ourselves from discriminating against others that we subconsciously may be doing without even knowing it. So with that said, let's go ahead and break up into two groups and get the conversation started. And I want to thank you for taking this time to listen to me here on this video on implicit biases. Until next time, bye.